Today I'm talking about why hot rod projects fail, or, probably more accurately, what are the roadblocks that people run into. Um, we can get the most obvious one out of the way, and that's money. It's a very expensive hobby. And it doesn't seem like it because when you drag home some old Hulk that you bought for small money, you say, well, this isn't too bad. But then you get into it and you'll find that everything you do is expensive. The very biggest thing that sabotages people's project is they don't study. You got to study and learn as much as you possibly can because there's so much misleading information. I remember one time I won a drag race by a huge margin because the guy's nitrous didn't work. He probably would have beat me if his nitrous had worked. And imagine if it was the fuel solenoid that didn't work and that his engine had gotten all nitrous. It would have exploded. You have to understand what you're working on. You have to do your homework. He could just as well have blown up his engine as having it bog like it did, where it just got fuel and no nitrous. Stuff like that causes massive failures. The next thing that sabotages people is we tend to think that the correct answer is the one we've heard the most often. There's a lot of rules of thumb, as it were, that are wrong. But you've heard it so often, it seems like it's right. And even among people that know what they're talking about, they're not necessarily going to be right about every single thing. Like if you look online, there's a thousand probably videos about picking the right camshaft. Truth is, it's not that hard to pick a camshaft. A lot of it is baloney, absolute baloney, what you're hearing on there. So doing your own homework and doing a lot of it is important. Another thing that may not cause the hot rod to fail, but can make it less effective, is mismatching of parts. If you have an 8-to-1 motor, you don't want to go to a 292 Magnum camshaft. If you do, it's going to be soft on the bottom and you can tune out a lot of it, but the parts matching, makes a difference. Another thing that gets people is a race part isn't necessarily appropriate to your engine. A big thing that sabotages Chevy engine builders is that not all 350s, especially, that's what I've built. I built one 400, but mostly 350s. Not all of them drain back the oil very efficiently. And so you go with a high pressure pump, it could actually destroy your engine. So you got to know that. And, if your engine is not a 10-second fire-breathing monster, you probably don't need a high pressure pump. And if you do go with a high pressure pump, you definitely want a high volume oil pan, and you want to take special care to make sure casting, flashing, and stuff like that isn't blocking the drain back passages, because that bit me once. But the biggest ones that I see are people over camming and people that don't set the timing correctly. Most of the time when you soup up an engine, it wants more timing at low RPM, so you need to curve the distributor so that you've got some timing at idle. Mine at idle with the vacuum advance on has about 29 to 30 degrees. That's kind of normal. If you think about it, circle track guys that use lockout distributors, and some drag racers, they'll have it locked at 36 degrees, which means it's idling at 36 degrees. That's normal for an engine with a racing cam. A pitfall that people fall into there is they'll blame the carburetor because the engine stumbles and, drivability issues, but they've got the initial timing set at 10 degrees. and it's probably 10 degrees less than what the engine wants, maybe more than that, depending how strong your cam is and whether your compression is matched up and so forth. A big pitfall is not matching the cam with your compression ratio. The cam companies are really good about their recommendations, and they're actually not that far off. There's lots of gurus on there that'll tell you that cam companies are stupid and listen to me, I know everything. Well, you know, you can do that, but if you call up comp cams, they'll tell you that 292 Magnum wants a lot more than 8-to-1 compression. And comp cams would be right. So it doesn't hurt to call their tech lines. And it's not just comp cams. A cam in my engine's an Elgin, so, you know, I'm not saying any particular brand, but whatever you buy, you know, follow the manufacturer's instructions as far as compression ratio, or at least as close to it as you can get. Another thing that gets people is not taking the time to understand how the parts relate together. A high stall torque converter needs a certain amount of gear, or else it's going to generate a lot of heat and your transmission's going to wear out quick. If you have a 308 gear and you put a 3000 stall converter in that, it will work, and you might get away with it if you have a big enough oil cooler with its own fan, but it would really rather have like a 373 gear, maybe lower, depending what you could tolerate for highway driving. But you want the gear ratio so that your stall speed is pretty close to what the cruising RPM is, so that it's not slipping like crazy. If you have a tall gear with a 2000 RPM cruising RPM and your stall is 3000, that torque converter is slipping constantly, and that's generating tons of heat. So that has to match up. You know, another thing that causes a car to not perform very well is, you know, picking the wrong gear. If your cam runs out of breath at 5,000 RPM, you don't want a 456 gear. If you've got that 292 Magnum in there, you don't want a 308 gear. One place I like to look at is wallaceracing.com. They have a bunch of racing calculators that provide a ton of information, from gearing, figuring out the RPMs of each you get out of each gear with a certain rear end, certain tire size. They have all kinds of engine calculations. They have horsepower calculations. That's a great place for information. Just play with all these calculators, and you can learn a lot from it. I know that I have. So I hope this video was helpful to you, and enjoy. Please like and subscribe.